into the grievous error of depersonalizing the concept of God, and they emerged not with a lofty and spiritual ideal of the Paradise Father, but with a distant and metaphysical idea of an all-encompassing Absolute. In their efforts at self-preservation, the Brahmins had rejected the one God of Melchizedek, and now they found themselves with the hypothesis of Brahman, that indefinite and elusive philosophic self, that impersonal and impotent It, which has left the spiritual life of India helpless and prostrate from that unfortunate day to the 20th century. It was during the times of the writing of the Upanishads that Buddhism arose in India. But despite its successes of 1,000 years, it could not compete with later Hinduism. Despite a higher morality, its early portrayal of God was even less well-defined than was that of Hinduism, which provided for lesser and personal deities. Buddhism finally gave way in northern India before the onslaught of a militant Islam, with its clear-cut concept of Allah as the supreme God of the universe. 3. Brahmanic philosophy. While the highest phase of Brahmanism was hardly a religion, it was truly one of the most noble reaches of the mortal mind into the domains of philosophy and metaphysics. Having started out to discover final reality, the Indian mind did not stop until it had speculated about almost every phase of theology, accepting the essential dual concept of religion, the existence of the universal Father of all universe creatures, and the fact of the ascending experience in the universe of these very creatures as they seek to attain the eternal Father, who has commanded them to be perfect even as he is perfect. In the concept of Brahman, the minds of those days truly grasped at the idea of some all-pervading absolute, for this postulate was at one and the same time identified as creative energy and cosmic reaction. Brahman was conceived to be beyond all definition, capable of being comprehended only by the successive negation of all finite qualities. It was definitely a belief in an absolute, even an infinite, being, but this concept was largely devoid of personality attributes, and was therefore not experienceable by individual religionists. Brahman Narayana was conceived as the absolute, the infinite It is, the primordial creative potency of the potential cosmos, the universal self existing static and potential throughout all eternity. Had the philosophers of those days been able to make the next advance in deity conception, had they been able to conceive of the Brahman as associative and creative, as a personality approachable by created and evolving beings, then might such a teaching have become the most advanced portraiture of deity on Urantia, since it would have encompassed the first 5 levels of total deity function, and might possibly have envisioned the remaining 2. In certain phases, the concept of the one universal Oversoul as the totality of the summation of all creature existence led the Indian philosophers very close to the truth of the Supreme Being, but this truth availed them not because they failed to evolve any reasonable or rational personal approach to the attainment of their theoretic monotheistic goal of Brahman Narayana. The karma principle of causality continuity is, again, very close to the truth of the repercussional synthesis of all time-space actions in the deity presence of the Supreme. But this postulate never provided for the coordinate personal attainment of deity by the individual religionist, only for the ultimate engulfment of all personality by the universal Oversoul. The philosophy of Brahmanism also came very near to the realization of the indwelling of the thought adjusters, only to become perverted through the misconception of truth. The teaching that the soul is the indwelling of the Brahman would have paved the way for an advanced religion, had not this concept been completely vitiated by the belief that there is no human individuality apart from this indwelling of the Universal One. In the doctrine of the merging of the self-soul with the oversoul, the theologians of India failed to provide for the survival of something human, something new and unique, something born of the union of the will of man and the will of God. The teaching of the soul's return to the Brahman is closely parallel to the truth of the adjuster's return to the bosom of the Universal Father, But there is something distinct from the adjuster which also survives, the morontial counterpart of mortal personality, and this vital concept was fatally absent from Brahmanic philosophy. Brahmanic philosophy has approximated many of the facts of the universe and has approached numerous cosmic truths, but it has all too often fallen victim to the error of failing to differentiate between the several levels of reality, such as absolute, transcendental, and finite. It has failed to take into account that what may be finite illusory on the absolute level may be absolutely real on the finite level. And it has also taken no cognizance of the essential personality of the Universal Father, who is personally contactable on all levels, from the evolutionary creature's limited experience with God on up to the limitless experience of the Eternal Son with the Paradise Father. 4. The Hindu religion. With the passing of the centuries in India, the populace returned in measure to the ancient rituals of the Vedas as they had been modified by the teachings of the Melchizedek missionaries and crystallized by the later Brahmin priesthood. This, the oldest and most cosmopolitan of the world's religions, has undergone further changes in response to Buddhism and Jainism, and to the later appearing influences of Mohammedanism and Christianity. But by the time the teachings of Jesus arrived, they had already become so occidentalized as to be a white man's religion, hence strange and foreign to the Hindu mind. Hindu theology, at present, depicts 4 descending levels of deity and divinity. 1. The Brahman, the Absolute, the Infinite One, the It Is. 2. The Trimurti, the Supreme Trinity of Hinduism. In this association, Brahma, the first member, is conceived as being self-created out of the Brahman, infinity. Were it not for close identification with the pantheistic Infinite One, Brahma could constitute the foundation for a concept of the Universal Father. Brahma is also identified with fate. The worship of the second and third members, Siva and Vishnu, arose in the first millennium after Christ. Siva is Lord of life and death, god of fertility, and master of destruction. Vishnu is extremely popular due to the belief that he periodically incarnates in human form. In this way, Vishnu becomes real and living in the imaginations of the Indians. Siva and Vishnu are each regarded by some as supreme over all. 3. Vedic and post-Vedic deities. Many of the ancient gods of the Aryans, such as Agni, Indra, Soma, have persisted as secondary to the 3 members of the Trimurti. Numerous additional gods have arisen since the early days of Vedic India, and these have also been incorporated into the Hindu pantheon. 4. The demigods, supermen, semi-gods, heroes, demons, ghosts, evil spirits, sprites, monsters, goblins, and saints of the later-day cults. While Hinduism has long failed to vivify the Indian people, at the same time it has usually been a tolerant religion. Its great strength lies in the fact that it has proved to be the most adaptive, amorphic religion to appear on Urantia. It is capable of almost unlimited change and possesses an unusual range of flexible adjustment, from the high and semi-monotheistic speculations of the intellectual Brahmin to the arrant fetishism and primitive cult practices of the debased and depressed classes of ignorant believers. Hinduism has survived because it is essentially an integral part of the basic social fabric of India. It has no great hierarchy which can be disturbed or destroyed. It is interwoven into the life pattern of the people. It has an adaptability to changing conditions that excels all other cults, and it displays a tolerant attitude of adoption toward many other religions, Gautama Buddha and even Christ himself being claimed as incarnations of Vishnu. Today in India, the great need is for the portrayal of the Jesusonian gospel, the fatherhood of God, and the sonship and consequent brotherhood of all men, which is personally realized in loving ministry and social service. In India, the philosophical framework is existent, the cult structure is present, all that is needed